climate change. Now, I want to shift very quickly because I want to give you a little bit of a magic formula. And some of you might even want to think about writing this down, because one of the things I looked at when I was studying the divestment movement was what arguments really persuaded institutions to move or to not move. What things were they worried about? You can't walk into a board of trustees or to any organization and say, morally I feel that this is repugnant, so you have to do something. Because every institution is run on the basis of its policies. That is, the rules that it has built up over a long period of time to how to deal with problems when they come up. So every institution, including Tufts, has a set of policies. And so you have to figure out how to graft these moral or pressing political issues onto their policies. Now, policies tend to break down into 5 things. 1, a university worries about its survival. Are we going to be here in 100 years? It's one of our missions to have this cross-generational commitment so that what we do builds for the future, and so that students like you, your great and great-great-grandchildren, can be here. And so they don't want to do things, that makes them conservative, they don't want to do things that will perhaps jeopardize their survival. Now, we can go into how divestment does not in any way jeopardize their survival, but it's important for you to know that that fear is lurking in the back of their heads. Another is, will this affect our growth? We have to grow to be able to give, and this is a real issue, we have to grow to be able to give scholarships, we have to grow to be able to build new buildings, we have to keep growing. It's an impulse of life. It's a problem with our economy, in fact, that we're so committed to growth with planetary limits, but it's a very natural thing. So another argument you have to deal with and that you have to counter is that divestment will somehow destroy growth. It's very easy to get quickly in the weeds about finance there, but the answer, as I alluded to before, is that it does not have to in any way. Another thing is efficiency. Is this a waste of time and money? They're going to tell you, as students, those of you who support this is a waste of your time and money as students. There are going to be better ways to do this. There are other things we could be doing. Let's fund a program that studies climate change so that other people will know what to do. We don't need to do anything. We'll fund what other people need to do. Or other efficiency or effectiveness arguments. The third thing, which is probably the most important thing for a divestment debate, is legitimacy. And that's where you start to get into the core purpose of the institution. And this was alluded to before, when is owning stock in broken model fossil fuel companies committed to destroying the planet consistent with the rest, or legitimate, in comparison to the rest of the university's policies and its mission. I didn't get a chance to look up Tufts' mission, but I bet it says something like, Tufts is committed to advancing citizens of the modern world, and something like that. That's great, and that's what trustees and president goes back to in thinking about why are we here and what are we doing. But you need to key into that mission and explain, as you are doing right now, why it ties in. So that's the legitimacy question. And the last one I started to talk about without even fully meaning to was consistency. That's why it was so important that we saw that Tufts has already had the policy of divestment in relation to South Africa and in relation to Quebec Hydro. And so Tufts' own sort of vertical consistency over time is very important. The other thing, consistency that is horizontal, that is looking at what other schools are doing. So we've already had a few smaller schools commit to divestment. We have, as you know, 170 schools thinking about it right now. I was talking to student leaders at Tufts and RISD just earlier this week. It's amazing to me, something I did not know. Brown already has an established policy for divestment. So you need to be in touch with the Brown students. They have a policy where if they want to raise the question, there's a committee that looks at it, they study it. This is different from most schools. And I would say very different from Tufts, which I gather you've had trouble even getting the basics about what you're invested in, which is really fundamentally wrong. A school committed to open debate hides one of the most critical facts about it. So consistency across time, what Tufts has done in the past, consistency across what is going on already around the country. Okay, I want to start to wrap up here by talking about ownership. Now, we expect that ownership implies responsibility. If you own a house and something happens in that house, you're responsible. If you own a dog and the dog bites somebody, you're responsible. If you own stock, you are part owners of that company and you are responsible. You can say not really, not very much, and so forth, but there is that link. And that's something that is critically important, because when you talk to a corporate leader and say, who are you most responsible to? They'll say, the shareholders. We are here to serve the shareholders. Well, who are the shareholders? Tufts. So your ownership is an issue that's core to how we define the operation of our law and our economy. And finally, I want to address the question of international equity. There was an amazing piece that popped up today, I'd never seen it before, written by James Lawrence Powell, who was acting president of Oberlin, president of Franklin and Marshall College, president of Reed College, president of Franklin Institute. Now, I don't think he was all those things at the same time, but he seems to have had a distinguished career. And he goes on to say, as the years and decades, first of all, he says, the overriding obligation of those responsible for a college endowment is to ensure that future student generations benefit to the same extent as the current generation. Trustees achieve this balance by adjusting how much of endowment earnings they spend each year and how much they reinvest. But global warming puts a new slant on the matter. By investing in fossil fuels, colleges are using their current financial resources in a way that jeopardizes the quality of life of their future alumni. By any reasoned and humane interpretation, this violates colleges' professed commitment to intergenerational equity. So you're acting not only on your own behalf, but you're acting on the future behalf. And finally, I just want to say, I think that it is incredibly great that you are interested in this, and important. But it's also an embarrassment, because in a sense, who should be interested in this issue? Well, it should have been the President of the United States over the last 4 years. It should have been the United States Senate. It should have been the House of Representatives. It should have been the corporate leaders. It should have been college presidents. It should have been the people who actually have real power in the United States. All of them have remained quiet. And none of them has done something that has caused significant change. So by default, it is now falling on you. Now, that's a privilege, that's an opportunity, and it's an obligation. And I urge you to seize it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was amazingly uplifting. I hope I can have that kind of presence. As you can probably tell, I'm not that much older than a lot of you here. I was here to substitute for my boss, Mark Orlowski, who is the Executive Director of the Sustainable Endowments Institute. He actually started the Sustainable Endowments Institute at a young age when he graduated from Williams College back in 2005. So I'm not an extreme expert on endowment transparency, but I have been very passionate about the divestment movement over the past few months. I went to the Do the Math tour, and I'm happy to talk about kind of the Sustainable Endowments Institute role there, what our research has shown us in the past about Tufts endowment, and what we're doing now to help you reinvest dollars in energy efficiency. We're running something now called the $1 Billion Green Challenge, and we do green revolving funds, and I'll talk about that in a second. So first, I just wanted to kind of talk about what an endowment is. It's a pool of money that donors contribute to. It runs the school's operating budget from the growth, the interest that it gains each year from its investments. And while a donor can give to an endowment and specify how their donation is spent at the university, whether that be for an endowed professorship or financial aid, they don't decide how the school and the fund managers actually invest that money in order to create the returns to the university to spend on the operating budget. As Bob was talking about high yielding endowments are important, but it isn't the only criteria for what an endowment should have. But we do need it to be profitable. We do need to run the university. And basically, the people that run the endowment are the endowment managers, and the chief investment officer usually hires those people, and they kind of make all the decisions along with the board of trustees. So basically, the Sustainable Endowments Institute, back in 2005, was the first organization to really look at endowment transparency. No one had really looked into that before at colleges and universities. And so we started a survey looking at endowment transparency policies and proxy voting. And we got a lot of media inquiries, and it was really clear that this was a huge point of interest. So then we created the college sustainability report card at greenreportcard.org, which looks at a bunch of different categories, including endowment transparency and shareholder responsibility, as well as climate change and energy, food and dining categories, and student involvement, and gives each institution a letter grade on their sustainability. And we're not doing that anymore, but that was what we were mainly involved in. And we recently retired that to work on green revolving funds. So the last survey that Tufts completed was in 2009, and it's on greenreportcard.com. And what we learned from, or .org, what we learned from that survey was that Tufts is mainly invested in indirect investments, not direct investments. So not in stocks that they can easily pull out of, but in commingled funds and trusts where they don't have the ability to proxy vote. And proxy voting is a way to invoke change, a way for a shareholder to invoke change in investment policies. So a lot of the investments are kind of hard to convince how they should be invested. And for those few direct investments that Tufts has, they are able to proxy vote. And there is actually a student committee, the advisory committee on shareholder responsibility. Is anyone here in that student committee? Okay. So basically, through that, students can give some input to the board of trustees about what they want to do as far as proxy voting goes. Tufts has all the proxy voting records only on certain issues available for view for the whole school community, and those issues are environmental and social resolutions and corporate governance. Also, Tufts allows everyone, the whole community, to view asset allocation. So if you wanted to see, technically, what part of the endowment was invested in hedge funds versus energy, real estate, commodities, you could technically get that information. So that's what we learned from that survey. And of course, Tufts endowment wants a diverse portfolio to minimize risk, so they're investing in a lot of different things. Sustainable Endowments Institute first got involved in divestment back in June 2011. We joined a coalition with other nonprofits to do coal divestment. So we really just focused on coal back then before 350.org came up with the whole fossil fuel divestment movement. And we were working with some other organizations you might know, the Responsible Endowments Coalition, As You Sow, Sierra Student Coalition. And through that movement, we have student-led divestment movements on coal that were starting since 2011 at UNC Chapel Hill, UI Urbana-Champaign, Earlham, and Swarthmore. So that was kind of the start of this. We focused on the filthy 15 coal companies like Duke Energy. And then once Bill McKibben and 350.org started the whole fossil fuel divestment movement, we teamed up because we thought that was a great area, considering our background and what we're doing now for us to get involved. And Mark, our executive director, co-wrote an op-ed with Bill McKibben a few months back in the Boston Globe. And basically that op-ed, many of you have seen it probably, it's about what to do with those dollars that you're divesting. What else can we invest in? And what we talk about is green revolving funds. It's a great way to, a new place to put your dollars from divestments. And here's why. Green revolving funds basically are a pot of money that a school sets aside, and that can be seeded by a number of things: student green fees, the endowment itself, the operating budget, and they use that money to fund energy efficiency and other sustainability projects. And the returns,